For the next 75 minutes, we're going to be focusing on a fairly high-level discussion on the challenge that we face and what higher education can do, with some good examples of what some of the schools that have been involved with this commitment right from the beginning are doing. We're going to, before I get to that, I have to have a couple of announcements. First is, could you please turn off your cell phones, because out of deference to all the folks that are here. Also, if someone borrowed the book, The Necessary Revolution, from the promotional table, that is a prize for our raffle later today, and if you could return it to one of the staff, we'd appreciate it. Okay. We have a very distinguished panel this morning, and I won't do much on the bios because you have all of the information about these folks in the program. But we have Dr. Michael Crow, president of Arizona State University; Dr. Jackie Johnson, chancellor of the University of Minnesota Morris; Dr. David Orr, special assistant to the president at Oberlin College and environmental educator extraordinaire; and Dr. Ron Thomas, who's the president of Dakota County Technical College. What we're going to do is have a panel discussion. I'm going to ask the panel a series of questions, and we're going to be using the CoVision technology, which I think many of you used yesterday. So if you while we're having the panel discussion, if you want to jot down any questions that you have, any questions to get stimulated by the presentations made by our panelists, that would be extremely helpful, and it'll move our Q&A session along afterwards really well. After the panel is done, we're going to ask you, we're going to take 5 minutes and ask you some broader questions about around things that you need from the PCC supporting organizations to be effective in moving forward, and then we'll go back into the question and answer. One of the challenges that I think Mayor County was talking about last night is the urgency of the issue, and I think sometimes it's important to keep in mind the challenge that we face. Yesterday I described it as a defining challenge of the 21st century, figuring out some way that we can keep the human relationship to the natural world in balance so that we can meet all the social, economic, and health goals that we have for society, particularly as we move forward and we will end up by the middle of the century having 9 billion people on the planet. It's a challenge that we've never seen before in the history of humanity. And so it's not simply an environmental problem we're talking about here. From my perspective, I'm not worried about the planet because the planet has survived 5 major extinctions in the past, and we're in the midst of the 6th mass biological extinction. This one is being caused by humans, and the challenge is not whether or not the planet will survive. It will survive. The challenge is whether or not the planet will be able to support and sustain the kind of modern civilized society that we have. And that's really what the issue is about. So I see this as a civilizational challenge as much as an environmental challenge. And so I'd like to start by asking David Orr to give us his perspective on particularly where the science is heading in view of the emerging information that's coming out now. David?
Tony, thanks. Good morning, everybody. Tony asked if I describe the science, and the risk here is being redundant, telling you what you already know, or the other thing is triggering massive despair in the audience. And several years ago in London, when Jim Lovelock's book came out, The Revenge of Gaia, he was on a BBC interview. And the interview went something like this. Pardon my lack of an English accent, but the interviewer said something like, James, it's so wonderful to have you here this morning. Tell us about your new book. Is there any hope for humankind? No. Jim, what's the future of civilization? Well, there won't be any. Jim, how many people do you see alive on the planet at the end of the century? Well, maybe 2 billion, and you do the math. And then the interviewer said, well, James, it's so wonderful to have you on the show today. Next week, my guest will be. And you get this huge disconnect between the message and the way we respond to it. And it'd be a lot easier if Jim Hansen would come up to an audience with an Uzi or a sawed-off shotgun. He would get their attention in a more fundamental way than he does when he says maybe 350 parts per million is our last point of safety. So you get the point. This is a hard thing for us because it just doesn't hit us where we live. Let me show you a couple slides here. First slide, please, Mary Lou. Can you all read that? This is the science of this. Next slide, please. This is taken from the Stern report that was done by Nicholas Stern for the British Exchequer in the fall of 2007. And this report came out. This is one of the graphics in it. One of the great things about PowerPoint is you can put things on a screen that nobody can read. So you're going to have to take my word for it. Here's what the slide shows, however, and the reason for having it up there. Across the top are a series of degree changes, 1 degree centigrade, 2 degrees centigrade, and so forth. Down the left-hand margin are a series of things happening to water, to ecosystems, human health, and so forth. And so what Nicholas Stern did in this particular graphic is to show that as things get warmer, as the temperature of the planet increases, and it's increased about almost 1 full degree Fahrenheit since the dawn of the industrial era. So as you go from yellow to orange to red, things get progressively worse. Now what this graphic doesn't show is the interactions between these things. Clearly what happens to water affects food, ecosystems, and health, and so forth. But that would be a graphic too complicated to see anything. The second thing about the graphic is that what we know now about the science, which comes out just basically weekly, every time Science Magazine or Nature comes out, there's yet one more article, and it's mostly bad news. But what this doesn't show is that a number of things that begin, say, here on this graphic at 2 degrees centigrade warming, in fact, are already underway. So, next. This is where we are now. We've warmed the planet 0.8 degrees centigrade, give or take. That's from the IPCC. That's simply the rough consensus that in fact is how much we've warmed the planet. Next. This is more or less what we are committed to. This is another 0.5 degree centigrade warming to 1 full degree centigrade warming. And no one knows exactly what it's going to be. But the more we see, the more interactive the system appears to be. Next. This, the finely hashed line, is what is now commonly agreed by many scientists, including John Holdren and Rosina Beerbaum, to be a point of no return. That's a 2 degree centigrade warming. So our window of opportunity is the gap between the rough hatch line and the finely hatched line. Give or take a couple of tenths of a degree warming to maybe 0.6 of a degree warming. But nobody knows for sure. And that ignorance should be no cause for comfort. Next. This is and next. This is and next. This is, give or take, a lot of data compressed into 3 bullet items. A couple of years ago, Jim Hansen said we had 10 years to not understand the problem, not to put the science together, not to put even the policy understanding together, but to start the deflection downward. The second line here, Jim Hansen has a report about to come out in Science Magazine. Many of you will have seen it already. That says that 350 parts per million is the upper boundary of safety. And safety for us on the planet is really more like 300 parts per million against the backdrop of 280 parts per million for prior to the onset of the industrial era and back perhaps as far back as about 1 million years. The ice core record goes back about 650,000 years. So, and then 2 degrees centigrade warming is the point of safety. Next, please. And next. This means, to summarize the 4th report of IPCC and a whole lot of other stuff, we are already committed to a substantial warming. The second item here is, this is particularly problematic because there is this lag between the emission of heat-trapping gases, what comes out of our tailpipes and smokestacks, and the weather effects that we see. So what we're now seeing are the effects of what came out of our smokestacks and tailpipes 30 years ago. There's this lag. That lag will begin to shrink, according to IPCC, to perhaps 20 years, because the uptake of carbon in warmer and more acidic oceans will be slower. And then there is this this issue. It's simply too late now to avoid trauma. We've already bought a certain level of trauma. If you live on Tuvalu Island, or if you live on low-lying areas, if you happen to live in areas where storms are becoming more prevalent, as they appear to be in the American Midwest, the trauma has already begun. And the question is not whether there will be trauma, but how we respond to that. Next item. There's no easy way out of this. As Bill McKibben puts it, there is no silver bullet solution, nuclear power or whatever, but there may be silver buckshot, lots of small solutions embedded and woven into community behavior and what we do in higher education. Next. This, I think Al Gore had it right, this in fact is the first planetary emergency. And when Martin Rees, the astronomer royal from Cambridge University in Britain, published his book, Our Final Hour, he gave us a 50-50 chance to make it intact to the year 2100. And that was a book widely, very well reviewed in Science Magazine and Nature. This raises issues of how do we say these things to the public? What's the manner in which we say it? Do you all remember the movie, Jack Nicholson's movie, A Few Good Men? And Tom Cruise has got Nicholson on the stand. Cruz is the young JAG attorney. He's got Nicholson on the stand, and he says, I want the truth out of you about a murder that had been on his base. And Nicholson's response was, you can't handle the truth. And there's a certain pedigree for that view. T.S. Eliot thought that humankind can't bear much reality. On the other side, there's Winston Churchill. As bombs were falling on Britain in 1940, he didn't go to the British people and say, hey, what a wonderful opportunity for urban renewal. He didn't talk about, hey, we can beat the Nazis at a profit. He just said blood, toil, tears, and sweat. And so I think we have an issue of how we market this, how we, quote, frame it, how do we talk about this in a way that gets the seriousness across but doesn't drive people into despair and freeze them. Next slide. Long story short here, this when Angela Merkel, the German chancellor, gave her speech last fall, she singled out the United States. That on average we Americans emit about 22 tons of CO2 per person per year, but a 90% reduction means we've got to get that down to about 2 tons per person per year on average. That is a major change. I think the good news is that I believe the technology is there, and I think the willpower is coming into place to get there as well. As people have looked at the overall reductions, the numbers started out a few years ago, well, we've got to get a 60% reduction by 2050. Then it went to 70%. The Warner-Lieberman bill is around 70%, depending on how you count the numbers. The President's Climate Action Plan that we've been involved putting together has it at 80%. We're moving that to 90%. A lot of serious observers say that we've got to balance the carbon books and get to a 100% reduction by 2050. But the science is pushing us relentlessly in that direction. 2 more minutes. Last slide is this one. And then go ahead and just fill in that arrow. At Oberlin, one of the things that we're doing, or go ahead, Mary Lou, hit. We've launched an effort to use the college as the driver for carbon neutrality in the community. I can say more about that in Q&A, but there are, go ahead, hit it 2 more times. This is the kind of the list of organizations and efforts we've launched to try to use, not just take the college to carbon neutrality, but use that effort to drive the whole community in that direction. Thank you.
Thanks, David. Okay. Thank you, David. So I'd like to ask each of the panelists to give us, a few minutes of what you are doing on your campuses in developing your climate action plans. What are the highlights? What are the kinds of things that are exciting as, in terms of the programs that you're putting in place? And maybe if we can start with you, Jackie. That'd be great. You can either come up here or sit there, whatever you want.
I'll take my turn.
Okay.
I appreciated the slides that we just saw. I need to tell you that I followed directions, so while I have lots of PowerPoint slides, none will be on the screen. Over the course of the last not even 24 hours, I felt really humbled by all of the things that I've heard from my colleagues at various colleges and universities, and so am especially grateful for the opportunity to share some things about my campus with you. And let me just start with I'll try to be quick here, but with a couple of things about my campus. We are one of about 24 public liberal arts colleges in the country. We're relatively new, founded in 1960 as a public liberal arts college on the Prairie. We're one of 5 of the campuses of the University of Minnesota. And when people come to my campus, I always say to them, we look a whole lot older than we are. We haven't yet celebrated our 50th anniversary, but we began life as an educational institution, as an American Indian boarding school in the late 1800s, founded by the Sisters of Mercy. And then later, the boarding school was turned over to the federal government as part of that social movement in the United States, whatever we might think of it. In the early 1900s, the university changed hands again. The federal government turned the educational institution over to the state of Minnesota, and it became an agricultural high school boarding school for boys and girls, with the stricture that as long as there was an educational institution on the grounds, American Indian students would be able to attend tuition free. And that requirement, that opportunity really continues today. So while about 17% of our students are students of color, about 11% of our students are American Indian students from around the country, and we're really proud of that. And I mention this little bit about our history because as I've come to know the institution over the course of the past 2 years since I've been there, it does seem to me that in some ways we've come full circle with our energy initiatives, with our environmental initiatives, and I think in some ways we've returned to some of the early teachings of American Indian culture about not spending resources in the present that compromise the ability of future generations to live sustainable lives and to live well. And so I think I wanted to just share that as a kind of framing piece for you. I'm going to try to interweave some of the ideas about partnerships because that was also part of our charge, to talk a little bit about partnerships as I tell you what's happening on our campus. So you have a little bit of a picture of who we are. We're public residential, about 1,700 students. We're decidedly rural. We're on the prairie in Minnesota. And if you can just sort of picture this on a hill up above our campus, it's a big wind turbine. It's a 1.65 Vestas. It was erected in 2005. It actually began to provide wind power for our campus on Earth Day in 2005 and presently provides energy for 60% of the buildings on campus. We will add in about a year a second turbine to that location, and that was funded with CREBS, Clean Renewable Energy bonds that come out of the Internal Revenue Service. As soon as we can find a turbine, that presents another kind of challenge and opportunities for partnerships. Oh, by the way, at the same time, we will add a third turbine that won't be on our campus. That will actually be on a location yet to be finally determined on the Mille Lacs Band of Ojibwe, a reservation that's a couple of hours from our campus. And the Mille Lacs Indians have been interested in getting into wind energy, and we're looking for a partner who had had some experience in the area. And so in a kind of interesting partnership that has the complications of national sovereignty of the Ojibwe people associated with it, we will help them erect a third turbine, and we will share revenue with them from that. There's more on my campus. We have literally just completed construction of a biomass plant, and that will burn local products. It's a small biomass gasifier. It sits in what looks to me to be like kind of an elongated garage. The gasifier itself, I think, looks a little bit like a dumpster. I'm sorry if you're more attached to gasifiers than I am for their aesthetic quality. It will burn local products, so primarily corn stover, which if you don't know, and I didn't 2 years ago, are the stalks of corn. One of my friends who grew up on a farm said we on the farm called it corn stalks. You who don't know call it corn stover. It will burn corn cobs, mixed prairie grasses, and when it's functioning should provide 80% of the heating needs for our campus at the same time that it puts about $500,000 back into the local economy. That makes the area farmers very happy, as you can imagine. Someone said to me yesterday, but you need to be worried about carbon and carbon sequestration, and of course that's true, and of course we are. Morris is a town of about 5,000 people, but we have the advantage of having not only the University of Minnesota Morris, but also an outreach station of the University of Minnesota Agricultural School, and then a USDA Agricultural Research Services station with about 8 researchers who will do research on carbon sequestration. We'll be putting some of the ash back into the soil. We'll be comparing that with the impact of working the corn stover back into the soil, so this all becomes a research demonstration platform. So I've talked about a couple of different partnerships already, the one with the Mille Lacs Band, the other with what we call in Morris, Minnesota, the Research Triangle, and we say, North Carolina, move over, because we have a good triangle going on here. There's more. Krebs, these clean renewable energy bonds, will also fund a steam turbine in the fall, and that will connect to the gasifier, and those of you who are scientists can ask somebody else about how all of this works. Exactly, my understanding is that the green steam from the gasifier will help to provide additional electricity for our campus. There's more again. With an ESCO contract, we'll add a chiller that will also provide then, using the gasification system, the cooling needs for our campus. When I was here last year, I rode the bus, not here last year, but at the meeting of the signatories in D.C., with someone who, as we were sharing information about our campuses, said, you really need to get involved and you really need to explore ESCO contracts. And we heard, I thought, a really good presentation of that yesterday. And I have to tell you honestly that I listened to that and did ask and said to myself, what is an ESCO contract? I'm a sociologist, I'm not an engineer, and I'm not a scientist. I went back to campus and asked the facilities person on my campus what an ESCO contract was. Of course, he knew. We'll be the first unit, the first campus of the University of Minnesota to enter into an ESCO contract, and it's through that we'll be able to obtain the chiller. So I think I'll stop with that. I know that there are other stories to tell, but wanted to just let you know a little bit about what is going on our campus. I want to add maybe just this. The technology that we're using, as you all know in this audience, is not new. None of it is new. Gasifiers date back at least to the 19th century. Gasifiers are used in a number of places, more in Canada, I think, than they are here. Typically, they burn wood chips. Our gasifier is serial number 1, which makes us a little nervous. We'd rather be serial number 2 or 3 because we're not burning wood chips. We're burning different organic products. It will have a different impact in terms of the burn. This will be a research and a demonstration platform. But again, I think the point is that we're using technology that is available now. Our strategic plan calls on our campus to be carbon neutral, to have significantly reduced our carbon footprint, and to be energy independent by 2010. And we are fully on our way to making that goal. So it isn't necessarily a matter of waiting until 2020 or 2030. It is possible to do things now. There are funding sources and partnerships that are available. So on my campus, we say that sustainable renewable energy is a carbon management tool, and I think I'll end on that note. Thanks very much.
Thanks. That's great. Thank you. Ron?
Well, I'm going to give you a little different perspective. Let me frame ours. We are a technical college about 20 minutes south of the Twin Cities, enrollment about 5,000 credit students and about 8,000 non-credit students in customized training. We're also in a very strong collective bargaining unit. So I can appreciate the comment that was made a little bit earlier. You can't handle the truth. I can just imagine if I would have gone to our shared faculty governance the first day and said, you can't handle the truth, it would have been a vote of no confidence probably within 24 hours. So we've had to approach this very differently. What we did is we had to make a strong business case because some of the folks, to be blunt, didn't really care. And I was talking a little bit earlier to Bill Johnson. I think he's out there in the audience somewhere. He's the vice president of Haley and Aldridge. And he was talking about lean management. And sometimes when they have the discussions, they put a little 3x5 card on their forehead, and so what? And when I was talking with our shared faculty governance, that was the question that came to me. So what? So when we promoted our business case, we did several things. We said, this is also about reducing operating cost, and we'll be able to take some of those funds and put them back into the academic programs. We also said this is about fundraising, and it's about external financial support. And we have some real success stories there. And I'll give you one real quick. We launched a landscape horticulture new greenhouse about a year ago. And thanks to this initiative, it was fully funded with external funds, and we put solar panels in. Completed that in 9 months. I don't think that would have happened if we were not involved with this commitment. We also went to our faculty and said, everybody appreciates a clean work environment. This is what this is all about. Won't you support this? And we've had several faculty members who, because we have heavy trades, we have wood finishing, we have fumes that come up, we have transportation programs and fumes come up, and we're involved with recycling. And several of the faculty members then said, yes, Ron, we do want a clean work environment, we'll be more productive. So they supported that. The next thing we said is we're all about responsiveness to the workforce. And we need to get people prepared for the job market. So what we did is when we created, again, and this is on our website, we created 3 different committees. One was our executive steering committee, one was our instructional team, and the third one was our operations committee. But we decided with the executive steering committee that we wanted a power base. I wanted the finest people I could find in Minnesota and throughout the country to be on that executive steering committee. So it's made up of politicians, small business owners, big business owners. We have mayors, several mayors that have signed on to the climate commitment. It's a group of around 35 people. So when we did our kickoff, we brought in a person who was well known in the area of environmental controls in Minnesota. And we did everything, very symbolic. We had the food just like we've eaten over the last few weeks from local farmers and so on, and it was well attended. Over 225 people came to our executive committee meeting. That is what's helping drive this for us. It's not the president of the college, it's a team effort. So now when our faculty are serving on that executive team group, they really see the benefit of that. The other thing is we wanted to be viewed as a leader. We're very creative and very responsive to the needs of business and industry in our area. But we wanted to say we want to be looked at as the entity that is going to be responsive to the new green entrepreneur, to the new green, if it's a green entrepreneur or if it's a spinoff from a green entity. And from this, we've been able to develop all kinds of partnerships. A wonderful example. We went to our students and said, believe it or not, we're not into recycling 12 months ago. The students then said, gee, how can we help? Came through with some major contributions, about $100,000 to put our recycling plan in place. We're located where our facility is 500,000 square feet, which is, if you flatten that, it's about 8 football fields. We're out on what we call in a county area, which is a county of about 400,000 people. But we have a lot of prairie land out there. And so then we went to one of the local vendors, and we said, wouldn't it be wonderful if you would come together with us in a partnership and plant native grasses all throughout the front of the campus? And that will happen this summer. No cost to us through the partnership. And so that is what we've been all about. But to us, it was a process. We just couldn't jump into this and say if this is going to happen in 10 years or in 20 years or in 30 years. The process was very important, and it's been embraced. If you look in the program, I just looked at it last night on page 23. I see the Chancellor of the University of Colorado at Boulder. I heard him speak last year. And this is really what's happening at our college. And perhaps the most unexpected but gratifying effect of the ACU-PCC process is the increased collaboration and synergies that have emerged. But if you don't have your process down, and if you don't have collective involvement, it's not going to be terribly successful. One closing comment, if I may share with you. Yesterday, Peter Wedgie said, people see what they expect to see. People see what they expect to see. I read a book, and if you've not read it, I would recommend you do, Authenticity. It's by James Gilmore and Joseph Pine. And remember, there cannot be a disconnect between what you say and promote and what you really do. Make it real simple. If your motor pool has got Ford Victorias that are 8 and 10 miles a gallon, you got a problem. If your PR office or if your student services office is not using recycling materials for all their publications, you got a problem. If you're not coming up with to engage faculty with mini grant programs like we have done from external sources, you got a problem. So you need to walk the talk with this. And I'll get into some more specifics a little bit later. Thank you.
Michael?
I got in late last night, and this taxi driver bringing me over from the Grand Rapids Airport, he says, I told him I was going to this meeting and we were going to be talking about global warming. He says, there isn't any global warming. Those people are insane. Then he went on to tell me that there was 1,007 years left in the history of the planet. And I said, well, how did you calculate that? He had me trapped in this car for quite a while. It's a very interesting conversation. He was from here. Arizona State, just a little bit about ASU. We're a public university in metropolitan Phoenix. We have 64,000 students, about 21,000 staff, about 3,000 faculty, and the starting point for us in advancing this notion of sustainability, the starting point was really to work as we've been working the last 6 years to change the actual foundational logic of the institution itself. And that's a long process. It's a process that will take a lot longer than 6 years because the principal logic of most institutions of higher education is the advancement of the individual faculty member and the individual agenda of a wide range of folks. And it's very difficult to take on what we've taken on as this change in logic. The change in logic for us, and we were unusual in this sense, has been to actually work to have the institution accept responsibility for what it does. The data that David was putting up or that Jim Hansen puts up on the outcome of the world, all those technologies that have produced all those outcomes and all the smart people that have led us to this point where we have this global warming phenomenon, we produced all those people. We produced every problem that we're presently encountering. Yet for some reason we don't seem to own it. And so one of the things that we've tried to do is to build into the institution a logic for social, economic, and environmental and cultural outcomes. If there are certain outcomes that you want your place to have, your region, your state, your country, or the planet, one of the things you have to do is you have to say, well, we're actually responsible for this. The people that we produce, the ideas that we produce, the way we spend our money, the way we build the institution, the way that we advance, everything that we do helps produce that outcome. We have to take responsibility for that, and it begins changing your logic. So from that, it has been, I won't say easy, but relatively easy to engage sustainability as a central intellectual objective of the institution itself. And you'll say, well, how in an institution of that scale do you do that? Well, you work in several different ways, and so let me articulate at least 4 ways that we're working. At the university level itself, we've been working on 2 fronts. First is to introduce the concepts of sustainability and global climate change as a principal element of sustainability into the teaching experience for every student in the institution. So for instance, last fall, our new 9,400 freshmen and our 5,000 transfer students from the community colleges, so 14,400 new students showed up last August, and they all took an introduction to sustainability as a part of curricular adjustment that we made within the institution, which did have faculty resistance, which we survived. In addition, at the university level, sustainable practices in what we do. We've added 5 million square feet of facilities that are sustainable in ways that our previous facilities never have been in the past. We've changed our business practices. We've changed our transportation systems. We've changed and are changing everything that we do to move to this notion of as minimal a climate footprint as possible. That's a small part of what we're doing, because that in and of itself is insufficient. Why would we do that? We would do that to contribute to the reduction in our contribution to global warming. But that's insufficient because our footprint is actually quite small. We do that because the institution has to figure out how to teach through what we do, not just through what we pontificate. So at the university level, that's what we've been doing. At a second level within the institution, we created an all-university institute, a group that can plug in anyone from any discipline from anywhere within the institution to advance teaching or discovery or learning environments associated with sustainability itself. We built within that institute a school of sustainability, which is now up and running and underway. We're taking that to 2,000 undergraduates and about 300 graduate students, and so we'll be to that point in relatively short order. At the third level, relative to our community, we live in metropolitan Phoenix. We're now 4.1 million people, basically in a 35-mile circle. That circle will grow to hopefully not too big, but let's say 45-mile circle. Within that 45-mile circle, within the next 40 years, will be somewhere between 6.5 and 8.5 million people. So if you think about then that as the emergence of a new city within North America, what is it that we can do if we're actually acting and behaving in responsible ways related to sustainability that can help us to learn, help us to teach, help us to discover? And that is, we've actually taken on certain problems, certain issues that we want to contribute to in a positive sense. So we've taken on what can we do to eliminate the brown cloud issues? That's an air pollution issue. What can we do to eliminate the increased nighttime heat index within our region? What can we do within our region to make certain that the Sonoran Desert species diversification can be maintained even in housing developments and in cities as they continue to emerge? And so we've taken these on as places that we want to focus our energy. And then lastly, at the fourth level, for us, and this has been important, at the fourth level, we've tried and begun to expand our engagement with other parties. And so in an unusual venture for an institution, our Institutional Advancement Board for our Sustainability Institute includes one of the executive vice presidents of a major oil company, the chairman of Walmart, the chairman of a whole series of corporations and other entities that we're working with, intimately working with as partners to advance new ideas like supply chain, sustainable supply chains, and new ways of advancing with industry, and new ways of tackling problems and engaging the students and the faculty and the industry on solving these problems together. So these are four levels that we're working at simultaneously. Let me go back to the beginning of my comments. It's all about changing the purpose of the institution, actually taking responsibility for sustainability, taking responsibility for addressing these kinds of things. That's the fundamental thing that we've actually worked on. That's the fundamental thing that I think is the most important lesson that we've been undertaking at ASU. And this is not a new thing for us. We've been at this for some time and have made a lot of progress. And so I thought that key point has really been our most important thing. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you, Michael. I'd like to we've had a lot of questions. I'd like to take just a couple minutes of a break. But before doing that, it seems to me that what I've heard the four panelists say is really very profound in an important sense, and that is that I think for a long time we've thought that if we only worked a little harder, worked a little smarter, continued the wonderful stuff that we're doing in higher education and in society in general, that we would solve all problems with the emergence of just continued economic growth of the way we've done things in the past, the continued sort of incremental improvements in technological innovation. And what I'm hearing you all say is that we need a more deliberate strategy to say, how do we create a world in which everybody has a better quality of life? And that we need to take responsibility in higher education. That's what I think I'm hearing you say. And I think it's really important, because I think the assumption that we've been working on for the past 50 to 75 years is that if we just continue to do things in an evolving way, that would be sufficient. And I guess what we're now saying is that all of that, the way we've been doing things, is necessary, but it's not sufficient. And so now we need to think differently, more holistically, more deliberately about how do we create a strategy in which everybody on the planet now and everybody on the planet in the future will have a decent quality of life. I think that's what we're saying. Is that a fair characterization? Okay. So let's take a couple of minutes I want to ask you a question, because when we put on events like this, the three supporting organizations are trying to help you do your job better. So one of the things we'd like you to do is just to take 2 or 3 minutes to put into the computer what you think you need from the supporting organizations to move forward. So as we develop our plans for how to support you in this incredible effort that you're undertaking, we'd like to know a little bit about that. So if you could just take 2 or 3 minutes to do that, just jot down things in bullet form, anything that you think is necessary, that would be extremely helpful to us. So when we go back after the summit, the three organizations can say, okay, this is what the folks that are out there are saying we need, and so how do we organize ourselves to provide that support? Okay? So just take 3 or 4 minutes to do that.